I'm Laura Mock, DDS, the life coach for busy dentists. Welcome to the fourth episode of Truth Talk with Dr. Mock, the podcast where we talk about all things wellness for dentists. If you've been looking for help treating yourself better mentally, emotionally, and physically, you're in the right place. Well, hi everybody, and welcome to my fourth episode. If you're new here and you never followed my video series before that I had, you might be wondering to yourself, like, who is this lady and what even is a life coach, let alone a life coach for dentists? Don't we just go to work every day, put our heads down, make some tooth dust, and come home? Well, let me just take a minute to explain to you what I'm doing. If it appeals to you, you can keep listening. And if you're like, meh, I don't need that, then you can go listen to some other dentisting podcast. So I have a goal, and my goal is to help dentists in our country and actually in the world have better lives. And I do this in three basic ways. The first one is by helping them reduce stress through understanding their feelings. Guys, we got a lot of feels. We got a lot of things happening in the practice of dentistry, in the business, and in our families and our lives. And it all gets kind of jumbled up in there. And I help people reduce their stress by understanding what is happening with all those feelings. The next goal is for improving people's health, and I do this by teaching weight loss. I'm a weight loss coach, and there's plenty of us who sit all day taking care of patients, and then we're tired and we don't take good care of ourselves. And I have a very good program for weight loss. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is through improving relationships, because what I find is that in our leadership, in our parenting, in our marriages, we dentists struggle. We're not alone, but we have some special challenges with relationships. So my coaching helps people improve their relationships. Now that I've got that out of the way, you guys can keep on listening if that interests you, or you can, like I said, go find another dentisting podcast. Oh, look, you're still here. All right, so on the last episode, it was called Why I Was Overweight. And I basically sort of explained the cultural and physical factors in our society today that made me and many of us overweight in our country. And I explained the phenomena of overhunger and overdesire. If those words do not sound familiar to you, if you have not listened to episode 3, please pause this and go back and listen to episode 3, because this one is a follow-up. All right. So today we are going to get into the particulars of how to eat to eliminate both overhunger and overdesire. And I just want to preface what I'm going to say with a couple of caveats. The first is that yes, what I'm explaining is a big change. And yes, I and my clients eat like this, and several of us have lost significant amounts of weight. And no, I'm not suffering. It's actually really easy. It's the easiest plan I've ever been on. And just to make sure you know, I eat delicious foods every day on this plan. I still get to enjoy my food. All right, here we go. Step number 1 to eating to reduce overhunger and overdesire is to understand the science. And like I said, if you haven't listened to my third episode, the one right before this, you need to go back and listen to it. It's very important to understand, again, I know I'm always saying this, but nature's got goals for you. The reason that this is important to understand is because we need to understand why our brain is doing certain things that compel us to overeat. So nature's goal is to keep us alive so that we can reproduce. We can pass on our genetic material to the next generation. That's the same for any organism, whether it's plants or bacteria. Those cute little parameciums we had to look at underneath the microscope. Remember those little guys? They looked like they were smiling. We all do the same thing. We stay alive so that we can reproduce. Now, it's very important to understand, and this is number 2, is that we don't live in the environment that our bodies were adapted for. Our bodies were adapted to live in a hunter-gatherer environment, not to go to the grocery store to get fed. Our food sources now are completely different than this body is designed for. And we don't fight for survival. We don't need to worry about food being scarce because there's always another meal. It's always there. But our bodies are still operating, assuming that maybe we're not going to have another meal for quite some time. So that's the outline of step number 1 is we have to understand the science. And inside the science is the neurotransmitters and hormones that regulate how and when we eat. The first one is dopamine. So in order to really eat, to reduce overhunger and overdesire, we need to understand what dopamine is and how it works. Normally, it's a good system. It's set up to give us pleasure for doing things that keep us alive and maybe reproducing. It keeps you warm so you don't freeze to death by encouraging you to find warmth. It keeps you fed by encouraging you to eat. It keeps you breathing. It keeps you resting. It keeps you reproducing. It's also important to know that now dopamine can be misguided. Did I teach you yet about what a supernormal stimulus is? I'm not sure I did. So let me just explain this concept. A supernormal stimulus is something in our environment that wasn't present when our bodies were adapted. So cocaine is the perfect example of a supernormal stimulus. Even though cocaine is not necessary for our survival, our brain has a huge rush of dopamine when we consume cocaine. It's not very smart of our brain to encourage us to consume cocaine again, but it does over and over. And many of the foods that we eat in our society right now are supernormal stimuli. Okay, so that's dopamine. Okay, the next thing that we need to understand is insulin. Now, at its core, insulin, as you know, we need it to survive. We will starve to death if we don't have insulin. At its core, insulin's goal is to store energy. It tells the body, hey, we've got extra energy in the blood. Let's put it away for later. Okay, it's a fat storage hormone. And what it does is your pancreas sees that there's glucose present in your blood, and so it releases insulin, and then the insulin just goes ahead and says, go into the cell, go into the cell. And it's important to understand that it's responsive to amounts. So if there's a little bit of glucose, you get a little bit of insulin. If there's a lot of glucose, then you get a lot of insulin. If you get a whole bunch, it's sort of like putting your body on a roller coaster because the insulin goes up and then the sugar goes down. And if that happens, it packs all the food away until there's nothing left. Okay, so that's step number 1 to learning how to eat to reduce overhunger and overdesire. Step number 2 to eating to reduce it is to avoid foods that were designed by the food industry to give you this dopamine hit. Remember the term bliss point? The food industry knows what's most satisfying, what's the most stimulating. And so in order to do this, I recommend that you check for added sugar in your foods. If there is any added sugar in your food, you have to eliminate it if you don't want overdesire. This can be hard if there's foods that you're like attached to, like your wubby, and you want to keep it around. And I am telling you, you will still be able to enjoy food. And this is what we do to reduce overdesire. Anything that was made by the factory, you kind of got to be curious and look at a food product and go, all right, is this a food that the factory is trying to trick me into buying more of? Because a lot of times it is. Sometimes the food industry will make something that's actually helpful. So you just have to use your noggin and figure out which things are good and bad. And of course, I always use the example of spaghetti sauce. Most spaghetti sauce has so much sugar in it, and it's because they're trying to get you to that bliss point so that you'll buy their sugary spaghetti sauce. So be defensive. Be like, okay, I need to eat, but I don't want to eat all that sugar anymore because I already know it just makes me want more. So avoiding foods that were designed for the bliss point, okay? Step number 3 is to reduce how often you're asking your body to have a release of insulin. So we're reducing the number of times we need it in a day. And I want you to think about simple carbohydrates, okay? If there is sugar in the food that isn't naturally occurring, we're not going to eat it. There are foods that have naturally occurring sugar in them. There's dairy products and fruit for two that I can think. Sometimes there's sugar in vegetables. I know there's sugar in carrots, but those are naturally occurring, and so those foods are okay. And you can even eat grains, but you don't want to eat grains that have been taken out of their natural form. So, for example, you could eat steel-cut oats as long as you didn't add sugar to them. But you wouldn't want to eat instant oatmeal because it's not really the natural form of that grain. And you for sure would not want to eat oat bread because that's just been ground down. The more it's been concentrated, the faster it's going to get into your blood, and then the bigger insulin rush you're going to get, and then you won't have anything left. Now, I just want to clarify, yes, I did just say that in order to reduce the insulin, you want to eliminate all bread and crackers and pasta, any grain that's not in its natural original form, you don't want to eat. And I just want to reassure you, since I just said yes, no bread, I eat delicious foods every day. I get to eat all kinds of yummy things. So don't think that you won't be able to enjoy your food. And I know it's a big change. Step number 4, well, actually it's part of step number 3, and it's about reducing the number of times your body needs insulin, is to introduce intermittent fasting. Now, the intermittent fasting definition is that we have periods of time when we're not eating. And the reason that that's helpful is because if we're eating all the time, the insulin is active, then it's difficult for your body to find times to do what I like to call dining in, which is basically, okay, we're not putting food in the body right now, so the body is forced to use the storage that we already have on our body. So we're like, I'm not eating because I am eating, I'm dining in, I'm eating off of myself. So when we do intermittent fasting, we actually make that opportunity where we can dine in. There's lots of different ways to implement intermittent fasting. Some people will go a week without eating, or even a whole day, I think is a lot. Plenty of people won't eat for a whole day. Some people eat twice a day instead of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times a day. Some people will just eat once a day. The vast majority of my weight loss clients eat twice a day. They eat lunch and dinner. I do have one person who skips dinner instead of breakfast. And my clients also do not snack in the middle of a day because snacking is another invention of the food industry. You got to have that Snickers bar halfway through your morning so you can create some Overdesire and have more food later. No. Once you get used to this way of eating, you don't need to snack because you're not hungry. And if you snacked, then you wouldn't be able to dine in. Couple more important principles for reducing your need for insulin. Fat and protein are your friends. Now, a lot of us grew up in the 90s in the era of like snack wells and, oh yes, eat licorice because it's fat-free. But really, if we don't eat fat, all we're doing is setting ourselves up to be hungry again soon. And also, fat doesn't create an insulin spike at all. Protein does, but not nearly as big of an insulin spike as carbohydrates. So when you're having your meals, you're going to eat higher in fat and protein than you're used to. So that's going to mean having some butter on your cooked vegetables or having some salad dressing and some nuts on your salad. You get it? And this way, you stay full for hours, you're satisfied, you don't have to be thinking about what you're going to eat again because you're fine. You're zen. You don't care. You can go prep another crown before you go home. It's no problem. And then the last principle I want to talk about, and this is a part of reducing our need for insulin, is training our body to become fat adapted. So some of you have heard of this concept, some of you have not. It basically means putting your body into a metabolic state where your body is ready to access the fat stores and use them. If you're not used to burning fat, what happens is you become what's called a sugar burner. And I will tell you right now, most of us in our country are sugar burners. So don't be ashamed if you are. It's fine. I can teach you how to not be a sugar burner. But what will happen is you'll have breakfast, 8 a.m., 7 a.m. By 9 or 10, you're hungry again. And instead of your body going, oh, we need fuel, let's go have some fat. No, it's much easier for your body to get a little hangry and go, hey, body, hey, self, you need to go eat some food. Why don't you go have a snack? Rumble, 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 shaky feeling, a little bit of a headache. For fat adapted people, they do not feel like this because their body is ready to access the fat stores. And there's a little bit of a technique for teaching your body to be fat adapted. It's part of my program. It's not that hard, and once you do it, it just makes it so easy to just eat whenever it's convenient or whenever you have planned to eat. Now, I just want to emphasize at this point, because that word fat adapted is used a lot in the keto community. This program that I have is not a keto community, or not a keto diet, I mean. It is not a low carb diet. It's just a way of eating more naturally occurring foods, including your carbs, okay? And there's also no substances or supplements or shakes or anything to be sold on this program. It's just teaching people the science and then the mind work that needs to be done to make the transition so that you're eating in a way that your body was really adapted to eat. All right. Now, a lot of you are saying, but if I can't have bread again, does that mean I can never have a birthday cake? Or what if I'm on vacation? Or there's a special occasion? And I will tell you right now that it is completely fine to make an exception from the rules. The only thing is, I highly recommend that you plan ahead of time which times you're going to make an exception, because if you make it right at the last second, all you're really doing is giving into an urge. And every time you give into an urge, it just makes your brain and your dopamine complex that much more powerful. And also, it's important to understand that if you eat off plan, you're probably going to be temporarily increasing your overhunger and your overdesire. So when you eat off plan, you need to keep in mind that you're going to have that to deal with. Now, I just got back from vacation last night, actually, and I was gone for basically 6 days. And I did pretty good, but I did some cheating because I was in Mexico. I planned it, don't worry. But what I found is that the longer I was down there, the easier it was to slip into, oh, I'll just have some of these chips. So my overdesire was definitely going up while I was there. And what I really noticed is on the plane back, I got so hungry. I am not used to feeling that anymore. I'm used to being like, well, I'll just eat when I eat. But I was waiting for the flight attendant to bring around some food, and I was like, I'm going to kill someone. Ah! I was so hungry, and I'm not used to feeling it, but it's because I've been in this fat adapted Zen state. Now, if this sounds like if this appeals to you and you're like, I would like to be in a place where I don't care so much about food, I will tell you that everything I just taught you is literally everything that you need to know to implement it yourself. And I will even tell you where you can find more information for self-study. I would start with Dr. Jason Fung. He's basically the guru for intermittent fasting, and he wrote a really easy to read book called The Obesity Code. It's on Audible, so you can turn it on in your car if you want to learn more about intermittent fasting. And then I would also point you to a book by Nina Teicholz, and it is called The Big Fat Surprise. I kind of skimmed through it. It's pretty amazing. She is one of the journalists who really uncovered the fact that the food industry really pushed for the low-fat, high-sugar food products. And then I would also follow another doctor. His name is Dr. Mark Hyman, and he has a big social media presence. I watch him on Instagram. He's always talking about this sort of high sugar, high refined carbohydrate diet and how it has damaged us in our bodies. So that's a good one to look at too. And now I just want to emphasize one more thing, which is even though I have told you literally everything you need to know to implement these changes on your own, the vast majority of people either won't or can't do it by themselves. And that is because of what our minds do. This is where life coaching comes in very handy, because I can teach you what your mind is doing when it tries to get you to go back and eat the old way. It's going to try. And it's because of supernormal stimuli. It's because it thinks it's trying to do the right thing, but we already know it's misguided. But the coaching that we do helps people get over that hump and into a place where it just becomes so easy to stick to the diet plan. It's really not that hard to eat this. In fact, it's so easy, and I can help you get there. I've already helped so many of you do it. So if this sounds appealing to you, I encourage you to reach out to me. I would love to get to know you, and I would be very thrilled to have you get to that Zen place, that fat adaptation. Well, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope that you do reach out to me. Even if you don't, listen to my next podcast, because I'm going to keep on telling you things that are super handy. Thank you for listening to Truth Doc with Dr. Ma. To learn more, please visit thelifecoachforbusydentist.com and take advantage of my current offer for a free, no obligation consultation to find out if having a life coach is right for you. I promise you won't regret it.